Hey guys, welcome to the AFL Round 10 betting trend report video for the upcoming games this weekend. In this video, I go through all 9 games, what the odds are for each matchup, and comparing that to what the odds were, what the total points line was from their previous matchups, going through their past 5, because the betting companies use that information to set what the odds are. And so instead of looking at a game going, oh yeah, I think Geelong should be 4.5-point favorites against Gold Coast, and actually go back through and kind of work back to see how they could have come to that number and then look for mistakes in that market. Then we match that up with the statistics to give us the full picture on how teams are performing. So then we're able to make the best possible bets on the game. Before we get to this weekend's games though, quickly look back on last weekend where the Thursday and Friday night games were really, really good. Carlton had a big lead against the Melbourne Demons. Melbourne came all the way back to fall 1 point short. Port Adelaide built a really big lead against Geelong at GMHBA. Geelong came back to fall 6 points short. Swans ran out big winners against Freo over in Perth. Hawthorn got up as an underdog against St Kilda. So there were 4 underdogs who won outright last weekend. The first of those was Carlton over Melbourne. Port Adelaide were the underdog against Geelong. Hawthorn underdog against St Kilda. And then the final one was Essendon as underdog against GWS. This was the only game I got wrong last weekend. It's kind of funny how the game that you're genuinely, you feel like most confident in the results on out of all your bets, that's the one that doesn't work out. But that's the reason why I recommend to everyone to level stake all your bets, because in one single game, anything can happen. So you can never go and be too overconfident on a single matchup. By evenly staking your bets and ensuring that every bet you're putting on, you're following the same process for your decision making, then that's what's going to allow you to win, because you're not going to win by just hammering one game and hoping that it goes your way, and then because that throws your bankroll and everything completely out the window. Anyway, for the rest of the games, Western Bulldogs, 91-point winners against Richmond. Gold Coast, big winners against the North Melbourne, and Collingwood, big winners against the West Coast Eagles. And we ended the round with a draw in the Adelaide Brisbane Lions game. Of these 9 games, 5 of them went under the total points line. The under is the better record. 42 games have gone under. Day matches have been going over, night matches have been going under. Then from an ATS perspective, the home teams covered 5 of the 9 games. And with that, home teams have just edged out away sides for the better record overall, but really no difference between them. No real difference between the favorite and underdogs. Underdogs covered 5 of the 9 games last weekend. Best overall angle is favorites -30.5 have gone 12-3 so far this season. The key here, though, is not really caring all that much about the overall records. That can just give you an indication on, okay, well, if a lot of home teams have been covering, you need to start looking at away sides, because for the most part, almost every year, these numbers tend to get close to 50% by the end of the year. Same if a lot of favorites have been covering, start to look towards the underdogs. The better way to look at it, though, is to go through each individual team and kind of look where their strengths are, where they're performing the best or the worst in those situations. The worst team so far against the spread is, of course, North Melbourne, only covering 1 of their 9 games. There are a few sides on 6-3 against the spread. Essendon, Fremantle, Geelong, and then Swans 7-2 overall against the spread, without Melbourne in there as well. So now looking ahead to this weekend's game, we start with a really interesting matchup. Gold Coast is being really respected with the odds for this game. So I definitely won't be betting into this before teams come out. Geelong are only 4.5-point favorites. Last time they met at the Gold Coast, Geelong was 17.5-point favorites. That margin has closed fairly dramatically. I've spoken about in many videos that we've done so far this season that Gold Coast are a significantly better side at home than they are away. Gold Coast coming off a big win last week against North Melbourne. Definitely a major step up in opposition this week against Geelong. And I do think Geelong are being slightly undervalued. -4.5 is a really small line. That suggests there's really nothing between these two sides. But on paper, even though Gold Coast have been really good at home, Geelong are the better team overall. So assuming there's no major changes, Geelong would have to be the bet. But when you look at games and you feel like there is like, okay, this number definitely something's not right about it, you want to hold off. You want to really make sure you check all the factors. And there's a lot of times in this situation, they can be trap lines. So I'm definitely aware of that. It's definitely not a game that I'm like getting carried away betting into. I'm holding off at this stage. Geelong do have a really good record. They've won 6 of the past 7, aside from that last game in round 3 last season. Geelong didn't really have their best year last year either, but they've been back on song this year. And last week against Port Adelaide, they were awful in the first quarter and slightly into the second. But after that point, they really did get their act together. So that was a bit of a wake-up call, and I'd be surprised if they put in a really slow start. The other concern I have with Gold Coast as well, mainly due to the fact that these odds are so close, it's just Gold Coast playing out 4 quarters. Like, they're going to need to play the entire 4 quarters really strongly in order to win this game, because the Cats aren't going to, do what they did last week. They'll put together 4 quarters of good football. The other trend for this game, the total 161.5. 7 of the past 11 head-to-head have gone over. The totals come down 172.5 to 161.5. No super lean on the total, but I would be leaning towards the over at 161.5. Definitely have to monitor the weather. For some reason, like at the Gold Coast, we get rain every Friday and Saturday nights for the past 4 to 6 months. Just every weekend it rains at nighttime. So that's one thing to be really cautious of. In this game being played on a Thursday night, that's kind of irrelevant. However, there is rain predicted, but there is only a low chance of rain. And even sometimes there's no rain predicted and it still rains. So can't completely trust it, but definitely leaning towards an over at 161.5. Next game, Sydney versus Carlton. This is a really, really good game. Sydney 12.5 point favorites, total 170.5. The home team has performed really well in this matchup. They've won 13 of the past 16, so that instantly gives an advantage to the Sydney Swans. A little bit of a tricky spot. They're coming back from Perth, but it was a fairly comfortable win last week. They have a 7-day break coming into it. So not an extended break, and Carlton do have the rest advantage. So not really an ideal situation. Think the line is slightly high at minus 12.5, would have it down to about 8.5 for the Swans. So for this game, I'm looking at either side 1 to 24 kind of margin try bet there, or the Swans 1 to 39. But definitely prefer the try bet because I feel like this could be a 10-point game either way. Carlton have won 4 of the past 6, and the underdog has covered 5 of the past 6. So that really gives you an indication of that, this game definitely could be close, and also 4 of the past 6 going under. With both of these sides, they're both really good attacking side. Both sides top 4 attacking. Swans are also the number 1 defensive side. Carlton aren't that strong defensively. So there are quite a few things in favor of Sydney based on the defensive side of things. However, with that travel and disadvantage, even though they're at home, Carlton should be good enough to keep this game very, very close. So Collingwood versus Adelaide. Collingwood minus 21.5. Total 167.5. 5 of the past 6 games between these two sides have gone under. Total's exactly the same as it was last time they met in round 15 last season. This is a game Collingwood should win, but Adelaide have been hanging around. They have covered the past 3, losing all of them, but covering them all against Collingwood. You'll notice they lost by 2 points here as a 17.5 point underdog. They lost by 1 point as a 4.5 point underdog at home, and then lost by 5 as an 8.5 point underdog back in 2022. So this matchup definitely has that history of being very close, even though Collingwood have won the past 8 against the Crows. Definitely like Collingwood 139 in this game. Not going to touch a minus 21.5. Collingwood coming off that big win against West Coast. Feel like that line is just slightly inflated, but I think they win this game by 3 to 4 goals. So it finishes right around that mark, which should fall in the 1 to 39. But Adelaide definitely been a lot better over the past month. But they do need to do it on the road and not just at the Adelaide Oval. GWS versus the Western Bulldogs. GWS minus 19.5, total 181.5. So pretty large total. Last time they met, it was 157.5. That game was at Mars Stadium, so at Ballarat. Now, but definitely has jumped up significantly since then. Even at 181.5, I do have the total at 184 for this game, so would lean towards the over. I don't love taking super high totals, especially when the past three between the two sides have gone under. This game is pretty interesting. GWS definitely need to get a win back on the board. They get the advantage coming back home, but the Bulldogs do have a good record against them, winning 5 of the past 6. The game GWS won was only by 5 points in round 20 last season. So Bulldogs definitely aren't out of it. These are the 2 and 3 best attacking sides in the league going against each other. Fairly even defensively. Would even say the Bulldogs are the slightly better defensive side. So leaning towards the Dogs plus 19.5 or GWS 139. Be surprised if GWS win this game by 40 or more. Just not completely sure which way I want to go there, because I definitely give Bulldogs a hope of winning this game. That loss against Hawthorn definitely spun them around going into their game last week against Richmond. Or when you look at it, it's a big step up in opposition to go from the Tigers to the Giants. And that's why I definitely am considering that 139 out GWS. Wouldn't surprise me if they win this game by that 10 to 15 points. St Kilda versus Fremantle, we have a really low total here at 148.5, but it's probably deserving to be so. Both these sides are bottom 6 attacking sides and top 6 defensive sides, and that situation always leads it towards being lower scoring. Have the total at around 150, so no real difference there. 7 of the past 11 between these two sides have gone under, but we have the lowest total that we've seen in the past 4 meetings. Obviously, the 2020 game was short in quarters where that total is at 120.5. So definitely going to stay away from that. I do like Fremantle as an underdog here, and more so at the money line as opposed to the plus 3.5, slightly more value there. Getting an extra 20 cents for the sake of 3 points. The underdogs have performed well in this matchup. The underdogs have covered 4 of the past 5. And I think Fremantle can get it done on the road. There were plenty of excuses last week for their performance. And also with the Swans being the best side in the competition so far this year. So I think they can bounce back off that. So like Fremantle to win against the Saints. Brisbane versus Richmond. Brisbane really need to post a win, and they need to post a big win. Aside from playing North Melbourne or West Coast at home, next best is playing the Tigers. And I think Brisbane can really rack up a score here. Their previous 2 against the Tigers, they've scored 134 and 106 points. The past 6 between these two sides have gone over with a total of 169.5. Like, that's lower than we've seen previously, but Richmond just cannot score. They're worst in the league, only averaging 64 points a game so far this season. So super, super low. Brisbane defensively have been a lot better than last season, but their attack has dropped off. So I think they're going to have the ability to slow down Richmond's scoring, and that'll be enough for them to rack up a score. So going to stay away from the over just because, as I said, of Richmond's scoring. But I like Brisbane to cover the minus 43.5 here. I think if there's any game for them to turn their season around, it's going to be this one. They performed really well against Gold Coast a couple of weeks ago at home, and they get another opportunity to put up a big win at home, which they desperately need because they need to finish in that top 4 to give themselves any chance. But kind of the ship started to sail a bit about their season, but like this is the final straw. They need to show up in this game. So going to look to take advantage of it. Richmond have just been horrible all this season. They're worst in the league in almost, like not almost, but majority of all categories that are worth looking at when analyzing a game. They've really struggled playing up at the Gabba over recent seasons. I think Brisbane get it done and get it done comfortably. Essendon versus North Melbourne. Essendon big favourites here, $1.05 on the money line, minus 47.5. Essendon are a side that have definitely exceeded expectations so far this season. Currently in the top 4 and playing really well. They beat GWS last week. And face much easier game this time around. 47.5 is a big total. Wouldn't be surprised at all if they cover it. North Melbourne just have a lot of improvement to make. They have covered 3 of the past 4 versus Essendon though. So this is a side they have performed well against. This is the biggest line that we've seen in the past 5 meetings between these two sides. And so I'm going to stay away from the line most likely in this game. I'm definitely looking at the total. As I'm recording this, there's no totals available for the Sunday games. Be interesting what number does go up. I'm predicting around the 170 mark. If we get around that mark, then I'll definitely be interested in the over. If we don't get that and it is slightly high, then I'll have a look into the Essendon total, team total to go over, and potentially play it that way. But I think Essendon can rack up a score here at home against North Melbourne, get a good percentage boost while they're currently towards the top half of the ladder. Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn. Port 31.5 point favorites. They've won 3 of the past 4 versus Hawthorn. Hawthorn have covered 3 of the past 5. They won the game at the Adelaide Oval back in round 2 in 2022. Port were big winners last season in round 12. This is another game where Hawthorn's struggling attack could help us get a slightly lower number than you would expect, and then we can play the over in this game. These two sides have had high-scoring matchups over the past 2 seasons at this venue. And even though Hawthorn really haven't been putting it together in attack, I think against a Port defense that Port are a good side, but their defense doesn't sit as well with their overall performance. So they are capable of leaking points, and Hawthorn may be able to take slight advantage of that. But obviously, it's a little bit hard with no total being available to decide whether we want to take it or not. I have the total for this game at 165. Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn. Port minus 31.5. Last season at this venue, they were 38.5 point favorites and ran out big winners against the Hawks. Prior to that, in 2022, Hawthorn won that game by a big margin as $3.85 underdogs. This is a game that's going to be very, very interesting from 2 perspectives. Firstly, what total goes up for this game? Even though Hawthorn have struggled to put up points this year, they have shown signs where they are capable of doing it. But even though their past meetings have been high score, I'm not completely sold on a play in the over in this matchup. But I am definitely interested in the Hawks plus 31.5. Port get back at home here off a really good performance last week, but it was mostly just their first quarter, and then they kind of shut up shop and tried to hang on, and Geelong were really charging at them late. Hawthorn at plus 31.5, I feel like definitely isn't the worst bet. I think they're capable of hanging around in this game. I feel like this line should be around the 25.5, even down to the 22.5 mark. So I think it is slightly high off that performance last week for Port Adelaide. But it's not a game that I'm super keen on betting on, even being a Hawthorn fan. I really haven't been able to get a good read on them. Their performances week to week have been very inconsistent. Their past 3 to 4 weeks have been a lot better since that bad performance against Gold Coast, and just not certain the market's completely caught up. So interested in the plus 31.5, but not a bet at this stage. And then last game of the round, West Coast versus Melbourne. Melbourne minus 29.5. I do like Melbourne at the 139 here. West Coast performances at home have been a lot better on the road. So if we just single those out, gives us a better indication on this game. But the away side has performed really well. They've covered 10 of the past 14. Melbourne have won past 3 against West Coast. And a lot of these games have been played in Perth. 9 of the past 10 all in Perth. The only issue I have with the 1-39 is we've seen Melbourne run out big winners in recent seasons. Back in 2022, they were 72.5 point favorites here. Last season, they were 50.5 point favorites, now all the way down to minus 29.5. And, Melbourne really haven't given us, a ton of indication that, they've dropped off that dramatically, and West Coast have improved that dramatically. So that makes me a little bit nervous that potentially this total, this line, should be higher. But in the back of my head, I have seen how, West Coast have been a lot better at home. 8 of the past 12 between these two sides have gone over. So that's definitely another angle that I'll be considering for this game, depending what total does go up. We've seen, big disparities between these two sides with the totals, 167.5, then 174.5 last season. I don't think it's going to be that high. I'm expecting something in the mid to high 160s, which is a potential overplay there. But definitely Melbourne should be winning this game. especially after the way they lost to Carlton last week. I think they'll come out with a point to prove and get it done in the last game of the round. But definitely make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you get the videos coming out closer to the game time. This is just the first look going through all the matchups. Later on in the week, we'll go through the specific games, break down the stats, and my final bets on a lot of these matchups. So definitely stay tuned for those. If you want access to all the sheets for everything I use, not just the matchups that you're looking at here, the trends, the betting records, everything I use statistically wise and data wise to analyze games on the AFL and that I've used for the past decade. Check out the Bet Finders. I'll put the link in the description. Created this channel because I want to help you guys make money betting on the AFL and other sports. So I'm going through the strategies to help you do that, and specifically when it comes to analyzing games. So stay tuned for more videos like this. I'll keep doing them right throughout the season.